Hey, what is up everyone? In this video, we're ranking every single costume inside of Sea of Thieves. Last time we did this, it was a few years ago, and there was a lot less costumes in the game, and since then, the game has exploded, basically getting a new costume every month as well as a new one with each season pass, as well as a few others that are unlockable in the game. At the time of making this video, we're at 71 unique costumes inside the game. I'm going to go ahead and not include ones that are just different variants of the same costume, and we'll just talk about all of those at the same time. So in terms of unique costumes, we're at 71 total in the game. So starting off our list at our worst spot at number 71, we have the legendary Treasure Seeker costume. This costume here is just a really ugly costume in my opinion. Just the color palette that goes with it is not very appealing. I really don't like the headpiece that's attached to it. And just in general, it doesn't really help stand out as a good costume, especially considering that this is supposed to be a Pirate Legend costume, and it's not even just the regular Pirate Legend costume. It's one that you have to get Pirate Legend as well as unlock a certain commendation as a Pirate Legend. So really, this should have been a lot better than it actually turned out to be. Moving on to our number 70th spot, this is the Shining Pegasus costume. Now this one is inspired by Greek mythology and all that kind of stuff, and I was really excited for that because I really am into Greek mythology, but this costume just misses the mark in my opinion. It's a little bit goofy looking. I think the gold beard and the gold face and stuff looks a little funny. I think the stone that it makes your skin look like, in terms of where the hands and the face and stuff, I think that actually looks really cool. Makes you look more like a stone statue. But then just kind of the white outfit looks a little bit weird in my opinion, and I think they just could have done a lot better with a Greek themed set. Moving on, we have a pretty classic costume in my opinion. This is one of the oldest costumes in the game with the Ruby Splashtail Monarch costume. This costume, I don't really have an issue with it personally, but I just would never see myself wearing it. It's not bad per se like the other ones that we were just looking at, but it does require, I guess, a unique taste for it. I do like a little bit of the details they have, like with the gold pieces along the costume, especially with that crown, and it is interesting to have like the red skin going with this, but in general just not something that I like to wear. Moving on to our 68th spot, next we're moving on to some of the crossover costumes that just all kind of look like normal people outfits. So starting off that with number 68, we have the Herman costume. This one I think looks fine, but just in general it's very basic looking. Following that, we also have the Carla costume, Red costume, Anamaria costume, Elaine costume, and Gibbs costume. All of these just, in my opinion, look very basic looking, and I get they're inspired by the different counterparts from the crossover they're with, but in my opinion, these costumes should be more epic in a sense. They should be like feeling unique, like something that you can't really get just from normal Outpost clothing. Really, these counterparts could have just been different clothing pieces that you find in Outpost shops or even in the Emporium still if they want to make them premium, but they don't feel like they deserve to be a costume. Something that deserves to be a costume in my opinion is like the Ruby Splashtail Monarch costume that we already talked about. That is a very unique looking thing there that just doesn't match the same when we're talking about some of these costumes. Moving on, at number 62, I wanted to separate this from the rest of the ones that we just talked about. This is the Captain Jack Sparrow costume. Now this costume I think does have a lot more details than the other ones. I do think it deserves to be a costume, but in general, it's just not something that I would care to wear. I get it really when you're talking about the costumes, it does supposed to feel like cosplay. But this one especially feels like kind of, a little not great looking to me. I remember when A Pirate's Life came out and just seeing how many people were wearing this Captain Jack Sparrow costume. And in some ways it just made them look a little bit goofy to me because obviously it's not the real Captain Jack Sparrow. And especially when you see them not play as well, it just kind of makes it look a little bit worse in my opinion. In terms of the costume itself, I do think this is a really nice one in terms of being really detailed. I like, the multiple belts. They really did a good job of capturing Captain Jack Sparrow's look in this. And I think it could be fun to wear sometimes, but like I said before, I prefer the costumes that really feel distinct like something unique that wouldn't be just regular clothing items. So this, I feel like, you know, while it's a good costume, it's still just kind of regular pirate clothing in my opinion. Next, we're going to get into some crew costumes. Now, before I get into it, I do want to say I really like the idea of having a crew costume. Though they tried to experiment with some of the costumes, they did this for 3 different sets. And basically what it would do is, if you got the main costume, so it'd be like the captain costume, anyone that's in your crew can wear the crew costume that goes with it. I think this was a really cool idea because there's going to be many players that you have like the one player that would be like me, who really plays the game a lot, who would probably own these costumes, so, you know, they would always have like the cool looking stuff, and then you have your friends that try to get on, and they might have like no clothing, or they might have the very default clothing that you get early on in the game, and they're just like, I just want something that looks cool to wear. And I think this really helps, one, with the role-playing aspect in terms of getting your whole crew together to look like have a certain look that all fits well, and it also just gives those new players something to wear, basically, that would make them feel unique. So it was a really cool concept and a really cool mechanic where you basically share the clothing with your crew. And for these next handful of costumes, I just decided to kind of group them together because I don't feel like they deserve to be too high on this list because they are just more generic looking clothing. But I do think they're a cool concept, so I just wanted to kind of get that out of the way first. So starting off these crew costumes, at number 61, we have the Rogue Tinkerer crew. Now these costumes I think look unique. I don't think they look especially great. I do especially like though the Rogue Tinkerer crew costume 3, which I'll have on the right here, which has more of like an apron type look. I think that looks pretty nice, but in general, you know, it doesn't really fit what I would want to wear too much. I also don't think the Rogue Tinkerer costume in general is one of the better costumes we have, so it kind of reflects that a little bit. But I think, like I said, the crew costumes I think just in general are cool, and having everyone matching together is nice. Moving on to our number 58 spot, we have the Sea of Sands crew costumes. These costumes I think look pretty interesting. The reason I put them above the Rogue Tinker crew costumes is because I feel like compared to those ones, these look a lot more unique. They remind me a bit of the Order of Souls costume look, so I think those kind of are similar together. And I also think that it does well having a kind of a diverse set of crew costumes that you could do. You have one that's more like a female crew costume look, and then the other ones are more like male or not really gender specific for it. So I think it does well as being an overall crew set. Finally, at number 55, we have our final crewmate costume set with the Soulflame set. This set I really like a lot. I think it feels unique. A lot of like the ghostly aspects to this work really well in a crew setting, I think, and it goes really well with the captain costume that goes with this, which we'll talk about later in this list. And in general, I feel like all these costumes, all these crew costumes look unique, and sometimes I prefer wearing them instead of even the captain costumes. So I think they did a really good job making these feel distinct and actually enjoyable to wear. The only problem that you might have with these is the glowing effect, so if you're trying to do something where you're either tucking or whatever, you may not want to wear these. But other than that, I think these are really nice clothing outfits to wear. Moving on to number 52, we have the Lodestar Costume. So this one, when it first came out, I liked a good amount. I really like the set that's attached to it, especially like the sword and other stuff that's with this set. But the costume is one of those that I go back and forth where I think it's cool, and then other times I kind of look at it and it's like, oh, it's a bit goofy. I think the kind of like curse, if you want to say it, that goes with it, where it makes your whole body like a glowing blue with the constellation seen inside, is actually a really cool concept, but in practice I think looks a little bit odd, and it might just be the clothing that goes with it. I would have maybe liked this set a little bit better if perhaps they made the curse that goes with it, that makes your body like blue and have like the constellations, if they made that separate from the costume, then potentially you could have that go better with some other clothing items, and I would have been interested to see what that would be like. The clothing that goes with it, you know, it's not the worst thing I've seen, but it's also not something that I particularly like too much. Mainly the purple, I just feel like doesn't go well with the rest of it. I think some of the little, you know, gold pieces that they have, whether it's that sun icon that's on like the belt going across his chest, or the gold wristbands, or the things around his legs. I think all of those things look nice. Even like the little toe ring, which I didn't even notice until making this video. All of those are nice little touches. I also really like the idea of having like the little pouches with like the maps on the side and like the other little pouch on the other side of his waist. All of those are really cool. I feel like just the purple fabric and the little bits of orange that we see really ruined this a good amount for me. Moving on to number 51, we have the Order of Souls costume. Now this costume, I think objectively, looks really nice. I like all the little details that you see with the little bottle on the side and the necklace and everything. And I think it goes really well with the Order of Souls set. But in general, this costume is really designed only for female pirates. Male pirates, of course, can wear it, but it just doesn't look right on them. And I've looked at it on my pirate, and I just really never have liked the look. And I hope in the future we get an Order of Souls costume that does better at doing that. So that's why I didn't really put it too much higher on this list, because this is something that I absolutely never wear, and can't see myself wanting my pirate to wear it. But I do think objectively it is a good costume. Next, at our number 50 spot, we have the Athena's Fortune costume. Now this costume I have mixed feelings on. On the one hand, it has some really cool details with like the blue ghostly tears that are going through like the gloves or the hat or whatever, as well as like the hook looks really cool, and especially all those chains that are wrapped around the pirate. I think all are really nice touches that make this look very ghostly and spooky, and makes her for a really nice reward for reaching Pirate Legend. But then, kind of just the flowery look of the costume with the way that I like to think of it more of a dress rather than like a jacket, because it kind of looks like that in my opinion. And, sometimes I'll look at it and I'm like, oh, that doesn't look too bad. But then other times I kind of like look at either my pirate wearing it or other pirates wearing it, and it just looks a little bit flowery and not something that I would want to wear, honestly. With that said though, I do think there's good merits of why this is a decent costume, but I don't think it's a great costume. Next at number 49, we have the Soul Seeker costume. So this is one of the newer costumes added to the game, and it's an updated version of the Order of Souls costume that we just talked about. I do think this is objectively a better version of the Order of Souls costume, and while I haven't used this at all, I don't know if I'd necessarily see myself using it too often. I do think it does better at being a costume that both male and female pirates can wear, and it not look weird or anything. And it does kind of give me like almost like a ragdoll type of look to it. And I really like what they did with the right arm, where it kind of looks almost like wooden and stuff. So I think that's a really cool touch, especially with the hood and the blue feathers coming off of it. I think there's some interesting things with it. The only problem I do have with this one is I feel like they did really good with the top part of it, but then the pants kind of fall apart and it just doesn't look that great with the rest of it. Next, we're moving on to a handful of crossover costumes, starting off at number 48 with the Tia Demal costume. Now, this one I think is very unique looking. I really like the dress that they have for this, and just the details in general I think look nice. Obviously, this is another one that's suited more for a female pirate, so it's not something that I would wear, but I do think it looks nice. Following that, at number 47, we have the Guybrush costume. This costume is one that, again, I feel like this could have just been regular clothing pieces that are found in the outpost shops, but in general, I do think this aesthetically looks nice and pleasing, and I could see myself wearing this if I had this costume. And then at number 46, to round up the crossover costumes that we've been talking about, we have Kate Capsize costume. This one I really like because it kind of has almost like an Irish feel to me, and I just really like the look of like you have like that hair that goes with it, as well as the green all over the place. It's a very simplistic looking costume, but it is aesthetically pleasing to me. I like the little bit of details that you see at the end of the jacket at the very bottom, as well as just the gold trim that goes around the entire thing. And I just think in general, this would look very nice to wear. Moving on to number 45, we have the Forest Blessing costume. Now this one is one of the ones that came from a season Plunder Pass, and this has 3 costumes in one. So there's 3 different variants, And I think I really like the first variant as well as the final form. I think there is unique looks to them. However, in general, it does look a little bit odd to me, so that's why I didn't put it too much higher on this list. But I do like some of the details that are on this, such as like the little pattern that's on the outfit towards the bottom, as well as just like for the final form where it basically turns the pirate into like basically a wooden character, almost like Groot or something. And just like the little bit of cherry blossoms over it, I think all are really nice looking. Moving on, at number 44, we have a very detailed looking costume with the Shrouded Ghost Hunter costume. This one I think looks really cool. It's, reminiscent of the elusive Shrouded Ghost. And I love the details with this, either with, you have the skin that's basically the same look as the Shrouded Ghost, being a very pale white skin, as well as just the details of like the red fins that are all over it, and especially like the mouthpiece that you have that goes around the neck, and both of them have like a double peg leg. I think is really cool, where you have one that's like a spear and another one that's just like a regular peg leg. I think are all really cool details with this costume. Following that, at number 43, we had the Circus Superstar costume, followed by the Tavern Chef's uniform. Both of these are Tall Tale cosmetics unlocked from the Monkey Island Tall Tales, and I think these are pretty unique. I think they are great for role-playing, especially the Tavern Chef's uniform, which is basically, a very, kind of like a dirty-looking chef with like just an apron and kind of a plain outfit. And I think the Circus Superstar costume is also another cool one, where you have like the bucket that's the helmet and just kind of like more of like a low-rent type of outfit. I think both of these are really fun, and I think they were really nice additional bonus rewards that they gave us for those Tall Tales. Next, at number 41, we have Davy Jones' Curse costume. This is another one that's very detailed. I especially love the hat where it has some of the barnacles that are still tied to it. You have his iconic claw that's for his left hand, as well as just like the details of like it kind of looks like he's been submerged underwater for a long time. And I really like the jacket. The jacket looks very nice with like the gold trim that's going along it and like kind of that darkish blue color. I think altogether this makes for a really nice package. You also have the choice between having it with the beard or without the beard. I think for me, I'd personally probably go without the beard. I would love to see them also make another variant that removed that like claw hook hand and just left it so that you had basically just the general outfit, because I think that would be really interesting to have. And that probably wouldn't be too hard for them to add. It would basically just be removing it and showing your bare hand. Next, at number 40, we have Stan's costume. Now, Stan is a very iconic part of the second Monkey Island Tall Tale. I think he has a really interesting looking costume, especially with that, big hat that he's wearing that's basically the size of his head, and just like the weird, like the little tiny tie and the interesting jacket. It's a very cool looking costume. This is again another one where I feel like it probably doesn't really deserve to be a costume. It really could have just been, different clothing pieces from the Outpost shop or the Emporium. But it, as a package and just looking at it all together, I do really like it. I think it's a very fun costume. Following that, at number 39, we have some more crossover costumes, starting with the Scrum Costume. This one I really like. I think it's a very classic pirate look. It honestly kind of reminds me of like, what you think of with the Revolutionary War and all those, like kind of the way they dressed back then, especially like with the hat that's all pointed and stuff and the jacket that he's wearing. It just reminds me of that era of clothing, and I really like it. I think it's a very low-key type of costume. I think it doesn't remind you too much of Pirates of the Caribbean, so you could see a pirate wearing that and you wouldn't really think of it connecting to Pirates of the Caribbean, which, some people might want that connection, but other times you might not want it. Like I talked about with the Captain Jack Sparrow costume, when people were wearing that, it kind of just, made it look a little bit funny, just seeing them play, and they're not really Captain Jack Sparrow, they're kind of just cosplaying as it. This one looks like, you could have just come up with this outfit, and I think it looks really nice. Following that, I have a costume that I really like a lot, and this is the Cutler Beckett costume. This one is very detailed for the jacket part, and I think it's really cool. It has the hat with like the little bit of hair that you see, like that old-timey white wig hair. and just the green and the gold and the black all together is not a combo that I thought I would like it too much, but I think it looks really nice. It almost looks like a more polished Gold Hoarder costume, because that's kind of like their color scheme with like the green and the gold and everything. I also think this is great for role playing, because if you look at it, it's very like that old-timey British look. So if you wanted to go in and pretend like you're the British fleet or something and just go and have some fun on the seas, I think this would be really fun for the role playing aspect. Moving on to number 37, we have the Prehistoric Plunderer costume. This one I think is interesting. It's not one that I'm particularly a big fan of. I think it does look a little bit odd with some of the color choices that they used for it. I think the arm that they did with it, where it has kind of like the amber skin with just like some of the rocks and dinosaur bones peering out of it, I think is really cool. I especially like the left shoulder where it has kind of like the dinosaur head sitting on the shoulder. I think that's a nice touch. But in terms of like where you look at, say, like the chest area, I think that looks a little bit odd. I also think I would have liked them to do the amber tone across more part of the body. So like maybe have the whole face and neck area be all amber as well. I think that would have been make this a little bit more of an appealing touch. But in general, I think this is an okay costume. Is it one of my favorites? Definitely not. But I definitely think it's a unique one. Another very unique one is the Sea of Sands Captain's costume. So we already talked about the Sea of Sands crew costumes. This is the Captain costume that goes with it. And I really like a lot of the details that are with it, whether it's the headpiece or the glowing eyes. I really like the little ornament ball that you see that's hanging on the side, as well as the parchment. And just even like the shoulder area where you have like whatever that fabric is that's sitting on top of him. It looks very regal and captain-like. It feels like it commands respect. So I think it's just in general pretty cool. And especially when you tie that to the crew costumes. And I think when you bring that all together, it's another one of these really fun role-playing costumes. At number 35, we have a costume that kind of is like the spiritual successor to the Ruby Splashtail costume, and this is the Lionfish costume. Now, when this first came out, I didn't think I was going to like it, because I didn't really have too much interest in the Ruby Splashtail costume, so I kind of at first related this costume to that. But then as I started looking at it more and I started using it, I actually found myself really liking this costume. I think the color palette looks really nice with more of like a lightish pink color mixed with the light blue, and you have like some elements of purple and gold in there. And I think all of those really tie well together. I think the face of this looks really cool with the mask, unlike the Ruby Splashtail set where it just turns your entire skin into like the Ruby Splashtail red color. This one instead opts to be basically more of just like an outfit. So instead of, you actually being like the fish, you're more just wearing like a costume of the fish, which is a nice difference, I think. And I think the mask goes well with this. And just even the elements where I really like the shoulder pieces where they're kind of the fringe that's on the side of there, as well as like the little details that you see like with the little gold fish that's on the belt. I think all of it together looks really nice. This next one on number 34, honestly, I could probably interchange this one and the Lionfish costume together, because I feel like they're both kind of similar ideas, but I'm not sure which one I prefer over the other. This is the Sea Serpent costume. This one, I think I really like the Sea Serpent set. I think the ship set and everything that goes with it is really nice. And this one feels like more of like a creepy aesthetic, whereas the other one was more of like a light-hearted costume and, very joyful, very colorful. This one's more of like muted colors, kind of a creepy mask that goes with it, more of like a harsh armored type look. If you're looking at the shoulders, it looks more militaristic as opposed to the other one, which is more like playful and fun. And even just like the way that the outfit drapes out with like basically kind of the fins, if you want to call it, or whatever they are for the sea serpent, just all coming down and they're kind of like jagged looking. I think all looks really cool together, and I think makes for kind of an imitating costume, honestly. If you were to look at this and you just saw this coming at you, depending on the pirate wearing it, I think it could be kind of intimidating looking. Following that, at number 33, we have another costume that's kind of similar in look to these two that we were just talking about, and that's the Mandrake costume. So this one is it's a very plant-like costume, where even like the skin is changed to be, kind of the tones of a plant. And I think the color palette they went with this looks really nice. It all really blends well together. I like the little flowers that you see coming off of it. And in general, I just think it's a really interesting looking set. I don't know if I would say it's something that I'd wear too often, but I do think it's really unique, and it does definitely define of like what I think a costume should be, in the sense that you wouldn't find this as an outfit inside like the clothing shops or whatever as like different pieces that you could get. This is definitely something that is intentionally designed to be all together, especially with the way that the skin looks, where you have like the roots going around the wrists and everything, and even just the way the skin looks like on the pirate. I think it all goes really well together, and it's a nice package. Moving on, at number 32, we have another Captain costume with the Rogue Tinkerer costume. This one I like a good amount. I think it looks really cool with the more of like a mechanical style. Like the arm is not really connected, it's connected through like mechanical pieces. You have like the goggles that he's wearing and just the different, like parchments that are going along his chest. I think all look really cool. I'm not the biggest fan of the color palette they went with this one. I feel like, this concept I like a lot, but maybe not the execution too much. I think this kind of design would work really well with a different color set. While I'm not the biggest fan of how they did that, I think in general I really like this idea and the look of this costume. At number 31, we have the Graveyard Gladiator costume. This one I feel like is a bit underrated. I don't ever see anyone talk about this or wear it in the game, but it's definitely a unique one. Kind of similar to the Sea Serpent costume, it feels very like eerie looking. You can't even like tell if there's like a face there. It kind of all just kind of melds together. And even like the way the arms look, almost like more of like a zombie type look, I think look really cool. I like the jacket and stuff that goes with this, and like the little hair piece that's coming out of the helmet. I think all of that together looks really cool. I do think it's a bit underrated in the sense that, no one ever really talks about the skin or I ever see wearing it, which is a bit of a shame because I think it deserves a bit more love. Following that, at number 30, this one might ruffle some feathers because I feel like it's a pretty popular one that I just never got into, and that's the Dark Warsmith costume. So this costume is not bad by any means, but I just think might be used a little too often. I just kind of, I think it's just a little bit overrated in my opinion. Whereas the previous one we were just talking about, I feel like it's very underrated. This one feels a little bit overrated in the sense that people have such a love for it, and I get why it is a unique looking costume, but especially when you consider how many other skeleton type costumes we have in the game, as well as even the skeleton curse now, I think this one is just a bit outdated. It's not, in my opinion, the best costume that we have. I do think it deserves to be up in this list. I think we have a lot of costumes that we're about to cover soon that are really great, and I think this is a good one to get us started into those really great costumes. I really like the little bits of fire that are all over this costume, where you have like the glowing orange, either for the eye or on the clothing pieces, or even on like the little fringes of the bone and stuff that are going around him. I think all of that's really cool. I think they could have done a little bit more with this. Like, honestly, I would have been really down for a costume that really had true fire coming off of it. Like, if you wanted to have some fire coming off of the hat, potentially, or something like that, that would have been really cool. I just feel like this is almost a little bit too safe of a costume. It looks similar to other costumes that we had in game, even just the Ashen Curse. It looks almost like a skeleton version of the Ashen Curse, in my opinion. So, I feel like they could have done a bit more with this costume, but in general, I think it looks nice. This next one on number 29 is probably our spookiest costume on this list, and that's the Bleakheart Banshee costume. I think this one just is very interesting looking, and it's like a corpse bride basically, where you have like the bride costume with the skeleton underneath of it. It has a pretty cool built-in emote with it, and just in general, I think this is a really fun costume to wear. And it could make a really good couples costume if you had, someone that you play with often and you want to do like another skeleton counterpart, whether it's the Dark Warsmith costume that we just talked about, or maybe one of the other ones that we'll talk about in the future. This could definitely go well with like a couple costume theme, I think. Moving on, at number 28, we have the Nightwolf costume. This one's a very cool looking costume. In my opinion, it's more reminiscent of like the Vikings and stuff. I really love the headpiece that comes with this, where you have the Nightwolf at the top with the green eyes and just kind of like the fur that you see that's along the shoulders and everything. It's definitely a cool looking costume. And I think it goes well if you're trying to go with more like a Viking type look with your ship and everything. This would go really well with that. Another one that's kind of similar to that, in my opinion, is our number 27th spot with the Labyrinth Looter costume. Now this is another one that's kind of reminiscent of mythological creatures. Obviously this is like the Minotaur, essentially. And I think this one looks really cool. I love the horns that are attached to this, as well as, you know, you have like the little bit of mask that goes with it. I think the rest of the costume is a little bit lackluster. I feel like they could have done a bit more with it. I think it would have been a good idea to maybe bulk up this costume a bit more, because I think it could be a bit more of an imitating costume with like the horns and everything if the rest of the body kind of matched with that. Obviously many parts are going to have different body types and stuff inside the Sea of Thieves, so you can't really adjust for that. But even just, you know, having like that fur that's on one shoulder, having that on both sides, and maybe bulking up like the clothing that's on the arms and like the chest area, whether it's like a jacket or whatever, I think would really help, you know, make this a more intimidating costume, which would maybe help it look a little bit better. Next, at number 26 spot, we have the Ravenwood costume. Now this is another one that's from a season pass, so it has 3 parts to it, and I actually think that all 3 parts look really great. Whether you go with the first version of the costume where it doesn't have any of the headpiece and it's just more of like the jacket and like the lower part of the costume, I think all of that looks really nice, and oftentimes I'll wear that because I think it just looks really great. I get to keep the rest of my pirate's look with like my own hat and everything. But even if you go with the later stages of this costume with like the beak and everything, I think that's another one that looks really cool. It kind of is reminiscent of, you know, like that Black Plague era where you have like all the doctors wearing like the beak mask and everything. And I just think it looks really cool. I love the feathers that are attached to this costume and just like the blue color palette that goes with it. I think all of it together makes for a really nice package, and all 3 of the versions look really great. The only other thing I would say about this costume is that I feel like the difference between the second and third costume is like very minor in my opinion, and they probably could have done a bit more to differentiate those two a bit. But in general, I really like this costume. At our 25th spot, we have a pretty classic costume in my opinion with the Bone Chiller costume. This is one that's been in the game for a long time, and it was one of our first skeleton outfits in the game, I believe. And I think this just is really cool looking. It's kind of like a skeleton Santa Claus, and it's really fun to wear during that time of year. I really like just like the little horns that are on it, and just like the jacket and the outfit itself. I think it all goes really well together. I also like the little bit of detail that they have at the bottom for the feet, where the peg legs are basically like hooves to kind of reminisce like that it's like kind of an animal rather than a person. Next, at number 24, we're moving into more trading company costumes, starting with the Merchants Alliance costume. This one I think looks really nice. I love all the little details with it, especially like the blue hat with the feathers that are attached to it. I think the outfit looks really nice in terms of just like the, you know, the yellow shirt with the blue trim to it and like the white sleeves and everything. I especially love like the belt area where you have like the different parchments that are hanging on it, as well as the Merchant Alliance logo that acts as like the belt buckle, and even just down to like the peg leg where you have like the Merchants Alliance blue color with like the gold pieces that go with it. I think all together it makes for a really nice package. Even just the detail of the Merchant Alliance glasses I think look really nice and really tie the whole thing together. Following that, we also have the Gold Hoarder costume, which out of all the trading company costumes is probably the one that I wear the most. I just think in general I really like the aesthetic of it. We have so much gold that's covering it in terms of, you know, the hat, which is basically all gold. You have like the necklace that has a bunch of gold pieces, the belt, the gloves, the hook, the peg leg, all of it. And I think it looks really nice. And if you wear this and have the gold curse also on at the same time, it just makes your pirate look super cool. And I think it goes really well together. And then finally at number 22, we have the Reaper's Bones costume. This one, I think in general, you know, not taking anything else into account, I think it looks like a really cool costume. It very much fits the Reaper's Bones, and I love the mask that's attached to it, as well as the hooded part of it, and just like the different layers of stuff that's in that like chest area where you have like the jacket or the shirt or the belt. all of it kind of like layered together makes for like a really cool looking costume. I do think over time this costume has gotten the reputation of being more like a noob type costume, so I think it does hurt its reputation a little bit, but I think in general it's a really nice looking outfit. At number 21 we have another costume that I feel like is a bit underrated, and this is the Crimson Crypt costume. Now this one especially looks like what I was talking about before, with kind of like that Black Plague type of look, where you have like the doctors with the beak mask and everything. I think this one looks really cool with like the red eyes, the really kind of slick looking hat that it has, the collar for the jacket that pokes really high up, I think makes it look really unique. And just in general, I think this is a really cool costume to wear. Now taking a completely different look from that one, at number 20 we have the Trader's Prosperity costume. So this is another new one that we got for Season 11, and it's for the Merchants Alliance. And I really like this costume. It takes two of my favorite colors, blue and orange, and kind of combines that together in this, and makes it for a very regal looking costume. Kind of like what I talked about before with the Cutler Beckett costume. I think this one goes really well with that idea. So if you want to have more of like just an overall like British, old-timey, more polished type of look, you and your crew could take this as well as the Cutler Beckett costume and have a really cool looking combo set. Following that, at number 19 we have the Captain Barbossa costume. Now this one has actually made it really high on this list. It beat out the Captain Jack Sparrow costume, it beat out a lot of the crossover costumes, and I think in my opinion this one just has enough detail and uniqueness that it stands out compared to the other ones in my opinion. I really love the hat, where it has like those things that are sticking out from it, and the hat almost looks pretty flat other than that. So that's a very unique look to me. I think the jacket looks really nice, especially with like the little gold pieces of like the belt poking out of it, as well as all the different layers that you're seeing with like the different shirts and the jackets and like the belts and everything. So I think all of that looks really nice, and I think this is just a cool looking costume. It also is another one where you can choose to whether or not you want to have the beard or on or without the beard. So I think just having that little bit of flexibility also helps make this a really nice costume to have. So in general, I just really like it. Moving on, at our number 18th spot, we have the Soaring Oracle costume. This one's a very unique costume, and I really love most of it. I really love like the white costume. I feel like it's something that we don't really see too much of in Sea of Thieves, where it's like more of like a white clothing set. I really love the gloves. The gloves are super detailed. I think the shoulder piece is very feathered and nice looking. Even just like the belt that goes across his chest, where you see like it's more of like a hook that's holding onto like a rope that's going around. I think that all looks really cool. And even just the headband that goes around the eyes is something unique in my opinion, where we don't really see anything else in the game like that has like something that's just covering your eyes and makes you kind of almost like if you've ever watched something like Daredevil, where he just, is blind, so he doesn't even like need anything in front of it, so he puts like the bandana around it. I think that's really cool. The thing that always throws me off with this costume, and it doesn't make me not like it, but it does just, make me wish that there was another variant that removed it, is the legs. I think the legs look a little bit goofy in my opinion. It's definitely meant to be more of like an owl type look with this costume, where you have like the legs are, very owl-like. I just don't really like it that much. And I'm fine with it being a variant, but I would love to see one where it just keeps the costume exactly the same, but then just lets you see your regular legs and feet. That, I hope they would add something like that in the future. I think that would make me really like this set a lot more. But in general, I think this is a really unique costume. Moving on, at number 17, we have the Golden Nile costume. This one I think is really cool. I love the headpiece that goes with this costume, because it's basically the mouth of a crocodile, and you have like the teeth that are all around either the neck area as well as the headpiece at the top, and I think that just looks really cool. The color palette for this one isn't amazing at all, but I would say it does, go well together. You have both the bold red and blue colors mixed with the gold and the white. I think they all maybe don't mesh as great as I would like to see, but I think it does stand out, and I think the gold pieces to it especially look good on this one, especially on the bottom of the outfit where you have like that gold emblem that's showing for the crocodile, or even just on the wrist you have basically like the gold plating, as well as the shoes have like the gold touches to it. I think all of those together look really nice. Next, at number 16, we have one that I don't really ever see anyone ever using, but I think is a pretty cool looking costume, and that's the Veil of Ancients costume. This one is very reminiscent of what we've seen both in the Adventures as well as the Veil of Ancients voyage that we have in the game, and it's unlocked in the game, so it's not one of the Pirate Emporium costumes, which is nice. And I really like the headpiece that's with this, where you have all the glowing eyes and the mouth that's all glowing. Very stone-like with this one, as well as just the tattoos and especially the hands. The hands almost turn into a ghostly form at the end of it. I wish they carried that across with the feet as well. I think that would have been a nice touch. But in general, I think this looks really cool. Moving on, at number 15, we have the Lunar Festival costume. This is another really nice, clean-looking costume where, you know, it very well fits with like the Chinese New Year and all that stuff. And it's just a really great Eastern inspired costume in my opinion. Next at number 14, we have a very unique looking one, and that's the Barrel Bombardo costume. This is absolutely one of the best costumes in the game. I know we have, you know, another 13 more to go after this, but this one, in terms of like both the role-playing aspect and just being inspired by something in the game, I think is really great. This is the perfect costume to wear if you're someone that likes to go and keg other ships, because it's just really fun. You have like the little piece of the gunpowder keg on your shoulder there, you have the little fringes of embers that are on it, you have the goggles that I think are really cool, and just this whole outfit inspired by the gunpowder kegs is just really fun in my opinion, and I think it's a great costume. I really wish they would have tied this to maybe something in game to unlock. Like, it would have been really fun if this was like unlocked for a commendation for like kegging 50 ships or something like that, or you know, just something in general. I think that would be really fun as like an unlock in the game rather than just something that's in the Pirate Emporium. Aside from all that, I think this is a really great costume. Moving on, at number 13, we have the LeChuck's costume. So this is another crossover costume from the Monkey Island set, and I think this looks really cool. I absolutely love the giant hat that's on this costume, where it has the very, you know, classic pirate look with the, you know, the skull and bones on it. The curse that you have with the skeleton form and the beard, I think is interesting with this costume, where you have like the green skeleton that, you know, is meant to reminisce LeChuck. I think it looks a little bit small because LeChuck's very big looking, so it looks a little bit odd on some pirates, but in general I like it. And I think the jacket, while it's a bit plain, I think the overall package with this one is nice, but it definitely is kind of individual pieces that I see with this one that I think really stand out, like the hat or the curse with the skeleton and everything. At number 12, we have another crossover costume, and this one I think is a really fun one to have, and I'm glad that we got it in the game. And this is the Infinite Depths costume. This one is heavily inspired by Halo, specifically with Master Chief. And I just love, you know, all the green that's going across it, the trim all over the place. And while I haven't really talked much with the costumes, a lot of the costumes have built-in emotes. This one I especially love because it plays the Halo theme from like a little music box with Cortana on it, which I think is just a really nice touch, and it really fits well with this crossover, and it does a lot of justice to Halo in my opinion. So I really enjoyed this costume. I think it looks really nice. I think the headpiece looks a little bit off. Like, obviously they're trying to make it still look more pirate-like, but with Halo, which is also like, they're very different types of games and themes and everything. Obviously one's like space and futuristic stuff, and then the other one's like all pirates and old-timey things. So it's kind of hard to meld those together. But I think, you know, having like kind of the armored helmet piece with like the regular pirate hat, just it looks a little bit funny to me, but it's not terrible at any means. Other than that, I really think this is a cool crossover costume that we have. Following that, at number 11, we have the Wrecker Wrangler costume. This one is another one that, like, when I first saw it, I didn't think I was gonna like it as much, but then as I started using it, I just really started enjoying it. I really love the set for this one. If you've seen me play the game and other gameplay videos or whatever, you'll see me use the Wrecker Wrangler pistol a lot. And I think that's a really good run, especially the Wrecker Wrangler blunderbuss. That's basically my main blunderbuss that I use. So I really like this set, and I think the costume goes really well. I love the headpiece that's with this, where basically you don't really see the face. It's kind of hidden behind what looks like the head of a Wrecker Wrangler fish, where you have like the eyes that are like these gemstones, as well as just you see like the teeth that are coming from it and like the fins off the sides of it. I think altogether this just is a really cool costume, and I think people might look at it first and think it's just too goofy looking, but I think if you were to use it, you'd find it to be a really fun costume to have. Kind of sticking more towards that, sea creature type costume aesthetic, we have the Sting Tide costume. This is another one of the season pass costumes, so it has 3 different pieces to it. I think unlike the other Plunder Pass costumes that we talked about, this one I really only like the second and specifically the third variant of this costume. I think the first one is just kind of a little bland looking, and the second one isn't terrible, but it's not that great. The third costume though is really the reason why it's so high on this list. I just think it looks very aesthetically pleasing. I love very like the wavy look of everything. It very much looks like kind of like a stingray, where you have like it all kind of like very loose and flowy together. And I just think the color palette they did with this, with kind of like the dark purplish blue colors and then like kind of the pinkish white all together, is a really nice package. And I really like this costume. Following that, at number 9, we have another season pass costume, and this is the Creeping Cold costume. Now, the reason I put this above the Sting Tide costume is, while I think the Sting Tide costume, the final form of it, I like more, I think the Creeping Cold costume in every variant looks really nice. So whether you go with the first variant that would just look very fine on its own, because it's more just like a jacket with some like winter fringe on the side and everything, then that looks pretty cool. Once you get to like the bigger versions of it, where you're basically into like an ice sculpture and you have like your arm that's broken up pieces of ice and everything, all of that looks really cool in my opinion. And this also has another cool built-in emote where you're basically blowing and making like a sculpture in your hand. So I really like all of that. I really like the winter costumes that they have for the game, whether it's this one or the Bone Chiller costume. All of the winter costumes that Thieves does, I think, are really cool costume. Next at number 8, we have another newer costume with the Hooded Hoarder costume. This is an updated version of the Gold Hoarder costume that we talked about earlier, and I really like this costume. I don't know if I'd say it's much better than the original Gold Hoarder costume. I think the original Gold Hoarder costume is really great on its own, but this one is a very unique aesthetic, where it has like the hooded look to it. You have still the gold pieces that are all attached to it, as well as that color palette that I like that for the Gold Hoarders, where it has like the kind of darker orange brownish color mixed with the like the lightish green all together, and also of course all the gold pieces that are tied to it. I think it's just a very cool, mysterious aesthetic. So moving on, these last 7 costumes that we're getting into are some of the best costumes in the game, and really kind of taking the idea of these costumes to the next level in my opinion. Starting that off is number 7 with the Soulflame Captain costume. So like we talked about with the crew costumes earlier, this is what those go with, and this just looks so cool. You have just like the glowing fire that's coming within, and just the whole body basically made of like a cage, like all across it. There's not really any piece of the body that you can really make out other than maybe the hand, but even that's just a glove. You're not really even seeing the hand or the boot at the bottom. The whole thing is just made up of this cage with a green fire burning inside, and it just looks super cool. And the headpiece is very intimidating looking. I think you just have like this cage with the fire that can kind of extinguish out of it at the top, and you just see the eyes and the mouth as basically cut hole pieces in the metal frame, that with the fire kind of coming out of it a little bit, and just a very terrifying, intimidating looking costume. and I absolutely love it. It was a really cool reward for one of the Festival of the Dam events that we had previously, and then eventually they made it just as a Pirate Legend reward. So this is a really cool one. If you haven't unlocked it in the game yet, I would definitely recommend trying to get it, because it's definitely worth getting. At number 6, this might surprise y'all a bit, but the Baleful Bloom costume is one of my favorite Plunder Pass outfits that we've gotten. Honestly, it's not because like the final form is like, super amazing or anything, but it's really just, the basic costume that comes with it. So the first version of this costume is basically just you with, a funny little hat and then, a palm leaf skirt that goes with it. And just that look I thought was really fun. And then you have the second version, which is more of like a tribal type look, and I think that looks pretty cool. And then the final version, where you basically become a full like tribal warrior with like the vines that are covering your body, or like in the, like the mask that's attached to it. That all looks really cool. So it's not necessary that any one version of this costume is like particularly amazing. It's really just the fact that you have all three of these versions that all stand on their own as being a really cool costume. So that's why I put it up pretty high on this list, and why out of like the newer Plunder Pass costumes I really like it. It's not my favorite Plunder Pass costume. That's going to be reserved for our number 5 spot with the Jack-O-Looter costume. So the Jack-O-Looter costume is another one that's kind of similar to the Soulflame Captain costume, where it's just like this very intimidating looking outfit, and I just absolutely love it. I love the pumpkin that makes for the face at the top, and then the color palette they did with this, it's very harvest feeling, very, nature feeling, I guess you could say, with all like the leaves and everything. It almost kind of like, if you're just looking at it, it almost reminds me of, fall with like the leaves falling and everything. It has very much that feel to me. And I even just love at the bottom where you see like the outfit kind of, go down and kind of come up again. It all really works well together. And this is probably one of my favorite built-in emotes, other than our number 1 spot, where he basically takes his pumpkin head and he picks it up and he spins it around, which is really fun to do. Following that, at number 4, we have the Stone Isle-Hopper Outlaw costume, as well as at our number 3 spot, the Isle-Hopper Outlaw costume. So I put these two together because they're very similar. Obviously the Stone Isle-Hopper Outlaw costume is just a reskin of the Isle-Hopper Outlaw costume. So I think it just made sense to keep them together. But both of these I really like. It kind of has like a Mad Max type of feel to me, where, it's like more of like that Wild West, like, dystopian type of feel. World's kind of fallen apart, and it just is really cool. I especially love that this is a reactive costume, and there's not really much in the game that's like this. Basically during the day it just looks kind of normal, like what the picture that I'm showing right now is, but then at night it turns into this very cool looking purple glow to the entire outfit, and that's just really nice. Same with the Stone Isle-Hopper Outlaw costume. It has more of like a reddish glow to it. Both of these are really nice variants of each other. I decided to put the original one up at the top because I think I like the more of like the purple-ish look to it a bit better. I think it just stands out a bit more. But both of these are really great. Getting close to the end here, at our number 2 spot we have the Legendary Herald costume. This is so great as a reward for Pirate Legends. So this is basically the updated version of the Pirate Legend costume, and this is unlocked at reaching level 100 for the reputation for Athena's Fortune. And it's really the costume that Pirate Legends deserved. We talked about the other Pirate Legend costume earlier in this video, and that I just didn't really like it that much. This one really feels like a Pirate Legend costume in my opinion. It has, the hints of purple that go well with Pirate Legend stuff. You have like the blue little feather at the top of the hat that is reminiscent of the Pirate Lord. I love the little Athena Pirate Legend symbol that's on the hat. And just in general, it's almost like a good mix of all the different trading companies that basically lead you to become Pirate Legend. Whether it's the purple that kind of reminds me a little bit of the Order of Souls, or the gold pieces that are like the Gold Hoarder, or even just more of like the regal, polished look to it that reminds me of the Merchants Alliance. It's almost like a mash of all of those together to make this Pirate Legend costume. So just all that together, I think the aesthetics of this is just really great. And when I saw this added in Season 11, it was probably one of my favorite things added for all of Season 11. And it actually made me want to progress my Athena's Fortune level so I can unlock it. So I think this is really great. But it doesn't beat our #1 spot, and that is the Spinal Costume. So the Spinal Costume is just an awesome one. It's another skeleton costume, and it has like these red gemstone eyes. And one of my favorite aspects of this costume, and what really makes it stand out as opposed to the other skeleton costumes, is that it just has this really cool shield and sword that's holding on the back of it. So just that combined with, you know, just the regular aesthetics of this makes just for a really cool, nice, classic looking pirate costume in my opinion. The built-in emote with this one is really fun to use. Basically it's him taking the shield and the sword, holding it up in the air and laughing at the demise of, I guess, his enemies. I use it all the time when I'm doing the PvP Hourglass mode, and whenever I win a battle I always like to do that built-in emote because I think it's just fun to do. And it's also one of those intimidating costumes, I think. I don't think it's as intimidating as some of the other costumes we looked at on this list, but it is, I feel like, a bit more intimidating than some other stuff. I think it might have lost a little bit of its luster when we saw with Season 8 adding the Skeleton Curse, because obviously you can make a pirate that's kind of similar to this, but you won't have a pirate right now that has like the shield and the sword on its back like this one. So this one still is unique as opposed to just, doing the regular Skeleton Curse. But that's my list of ranking every costume inside of Sea of Thieves. I'm not sure how long this video ended up being, but I really appreciate all of you that have stayed through the whole thing and watched it. I'd love to hear in the comments below, what is your favorite costume in the game and why do you love it? But that's all I have for this video. If you enjoyed, it'd be great if you like and subscribe. Until next time, thanks for watching and I'll see y'all later. Bye y'all.